The first thing my father did wasn't raise his voice. He poured himself another cup of tea. The porcelain cup never trembled in his hand. Neither did he. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul glittered beneath a cold November rain. 57 stories below, traffic flowed through Gangnam in ribbons of white and red light. Inside the penthouse, there was only silence. The kind of silence that powerful men use instead of shouting. The kind that tells everyone in the room something irreversible is about to happen. I stood in front of him with my hands folded tightly behind my back because if I let them hang at my sides, he would see them shaking. My name is Kang Ji-ah, 27 years old, the only daughter of Kang Min-jae. To the public, he was the billionaire chairman of one of Korea's largest shipping conglomerates. To the people who whispered instead of speaking his name, he was something else. The man whose decisions reshaped alliances. The man rival organizations feared more than the police. The man who built an empire no one challenged twice. And for 27 years, he had also been my father. He finally lifted his eyes from the tea. Tell me his name again. His voice was calm. Too calm. I swallowed. Kofi. A pause. Kofi Mensah. His expression didn't change. What does he do? He's a cybersecurity engineer. Nationality? Ghanaian. Nothing moved. Not his face. Not his hands. Not even the steam rising from his tea seemed willing to disturb the room. Finally, he nodded once. I see. I wanted to believe that was a good sign. It wasn't, because my father only nodded like that when he had already made a decision. He placed the cup carefully onto its saucer. The sound echoed through the room. Click. You've embarrassed this family. The words landed harder than if he had shouted them. I love him. My father looked at me the way surgeons study x-rays. Not emotionally. Clinically. You love an idea. No. I've met him. Twice. 32 times. That finally made something flicker in his eyes. Not surprise. Calculation. You counted. I stopped counting after 30. Silence returned. Long enough for the rain to tap gently against the glass. Long enough for me to remember being 8 years old. Hiding behind his office door because I wanted to surprise him on his birthday. He had been younger then. Still terrifying. But he had smiled when he saw me. I hadn't seen that smile in almost 15 years. When did you become dishonest? He asked quietly. I didn't. You concealed him. I knew you wouldn't listen. No. His voice remained level. You knew I wouldn't approve. There was a difference. He wanted me to hear it. I wanted you to know him before you judged him. I already have. You've never met him. I don't need to. Something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Not dramatically. The way ice cracks beneath water. Invisible. Permanent. My father stood. He wasn't an especially tall man. But authority has never needed height. He walked slowly toward the window overlooking Seoul. Hands behind his back. Perfect posture. The city reflected faintly in the glass. When your mother died. His voice softened just enough to make the memory dangerous. I promised her I would protect you. I know. I built walls around you. I know. I chose your schools. I know. I selected the people who entered your life. I know. I accepted your resentment because safety mattered more than affection. He turned. And now, his eyes settled on me. You ask me to hand you over to a stranger. He's not a stranger. He is to me. Then meet him. No. The answer came instantly. Without anger. Without hesitation. Just certainty. My answer is no. I drew a slow breath. What if my answer is yes? For the first time that evening, the room changed. Not because he moved. Because everyone else did. The two bodyguards near the door straightened almost imperceptibly. Mr. Choi, my father's oldest advisor, lowered his eyes. Even the house staff seemed to stop breathing. No one challenged Kang Min-jae. No one. Until now. You are my daughter. I am. You carry my name. I do. You represent this family. I always will. No. His voice remained almost gentle. You represent this family only while you choose it. The words settled over us like snow. Cold, beautiful, deadly. I suddenly understood where this conversation had been heading from the very beginning. He had never intended to negotiate, only to confirm. I won't leave him. I know. You've already decided. I have. Another pause. Then he asked one final question. Does he know who I am? Yes. And he still intends to marry you? Yes. Something almost resembling respect crossed my father's face. It vanished just as quickly. He is either brave, another beat, or foolish. He's kind. I didn't ask. I felt my heartbeat in my throat, in my hands, in the space between every breath. I love him. My father closed his eyes, only for a second. When he opened them again, whatever softness had once existed between us was gone. Then hear me carefully. Every word arrived with terrifying precision. If you walk out of this home to build a life with that man, he looked directly into my eyes. Do not ever walk back expecting to be my daughter again. The rain outside grew heavier. Somewhere below us, thunder rolled across the Han River. I searched his face, waiting, hoping, for some tiny sign that he didn't mean it. There wasn't one. I'll always be your daughter. No. He shook his head once. Blood makes you my child. Another pause. Choice makes you my family. My chest tightened so sharply it hurt to breathe. I didn't choose against you. You did. I chose love. You chose a life without us. The room became impossibly quiet. Then my father spoke the sentence that would divide my life into before and after. From this moment forward, his voice never rose. Kang Ji-ah no longer exists in this family. The words hung in the air. No one moved. No one interrupted. No one dared. He looked toward Mr. Choi. Remove her access. A nod. Cancel every family account. Another nod. Transfer her residence. Chairman. Mr. Choi hesitated. Just slightly. The apartment? It belongs to the company. Another nod. Then my father looked back at me. You may take whatever fits into one suitcase. Nothing more. Nothing less. I stared at him. This man who had taught me to ride a bicycle. Who had held my hand at my mother's funeral. Who had once stayed awake all night beside my hospital bed when I had pneumonia. He was still standing there. But somehow, he wasn't my father anymore. He was simply Kang Min-jae. Chairman. King. Judge. Executioner. I nodded once. Not because I accepted his decision. Because I understood it couldn't be changed. I turned toward the staircase. Halfway there, his voice stopped me. Not loud. Just enough. Ji-ah. I froze. Hope is a dangerous thing. Even after everything. Part of me still believed. Maybe, just maybe, he would tell me to stay. I turned. He looked at me for a long moment. Then quietly said, I hope one day. Another pause. You understand why I had to do this. Tears blurred my vision. But I smiled anyway. The smallest smile. Sad. Certain. I hope one day. I whispered. You understand why I couldn't. I picked up my suitcase. Walked toward the elevator. And without realizing it, walked toward the greatest mistake my father would ever make. If this opening moved you, take a second to support the AfroK Tales by liking this video and subscribing. Tells YouTube that you want more slow burn stories like this. And trust me, we're only at the beginning. Because 3 years later, the man my father called unworthy would become the only reason he was still alive. 3 years earlier, before the shouting that never happened, before the suitcase, before I stopped being Kang Ji-ah, there had been an ordinary Tuesday. I've learned something about life since then. The days that destroy your future rarely announce themselves. They begin quietly, with coffee, with traffic, with someone asking if the seat beside you is taken. The first time I met Kofi Mensah, he apologized before he spoke. Excuse me. His voice was deep but gentle, carrying the easy confidence of someone who had never needed to make himself louder to be heard. Is anyone sitting here? I looked up from my laptop. The cafe overlooked the Han River. tucked away on a quiet street in Itaewon where foreigners, students, and businesspeople blended into the same afternoon rhythm. Every other table was occupied. Only the chair across from me remained empty. No. I closed my laptop halfway. It's free. Thank you. He smiled. Not the practiced smile of businessmen. Not the charming smile of men who knew they were attractive. Just a smile. Simple. Honest. He placed a backpack beside his chair before carefully setting down 2 books, a notebook filled with handwritten diagrams, and a laptop whose corners had been worn smooth by years of use. That was the first thing I noticed. Not his height. Not the warm bronze color of his skin. Not even the quiet confidence that surrounded him. His books. People who read for pleasure fascinated me. Most people read because they had to. He looked like someone who read because the world wasn't big enough otherwise. For almost 20 minutes, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The espresso machine hissed. Outside, people hurried beneath umbrellas. Inside, keyboards clicked. Every now and then, I caught him scribbling equations across his notebook before stopping to stare thoughtfully out the window. Eventually, my curiosity defeated my manners. "What are you building?" He looked up. "I'm sorry." I nodded toward the notebook. "It looks complicated." He laughed quietly. "It usually looks worse." He turned the notebook toward me. Lines, servers, networks, security layers, code annotations. "I'm designing an intrusion detection system." I blinked. "For a company? For a hospital?" "A hospital?" He nodded. "They're becoming frequent targets for ransomware." His expression shifted slightly. "If someone attacks a bank, they lose money. If someone attacks a hospital," he finished softly, "people lose time." A pause. "And sometimes time is everything." I stared at the diagrams again. Not because I understood them, because of the way he talked. There was no arrogance, only purpose. "You must love your job." "I do." "What made you choose it?" He leaned back. "My mother." That surprised me. "She was a nurse." He smiled faintly. "She used to say the easiest way to save someone's life isn't always becoming a doctor. Sometimes, it's making sure the doctor can keep working." Something inside me shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. "My mother said something similar." He looked interested. "What did she do?" I hesitated. I almost said, "My father owns one of Korea's largest companies." Instead, I said the truth. She taught piano, which she had, before she married my father. His smile warmed. "My mother couldn't play. Neither could mine." We both laughed. The sound surprised me. Not because it was funny, because I couldn't remember the last time laughing had felt so easy. "My name's Kofi." He held out his hand. "Kofi Mensah." His handshake was firm without trying to prove anything. "Ji-ah. You have a beautiful name." "Thank you. It means wisdom, doesn't it?" Now I was genuinely surprised. "You know Korean?" "A little." "You speak it very well." "I'm still learning." His pronunciation wasn't perfect, but it carried respect. He had learned because he wanted to understand, not because someone demanded it. "How long have you lived here?" "Almost 4 years." "What brought you to Seoul?" "A scholarship." "And after that?" "A job." "And after that?" He smiled. I kept finding reasons to stay. There was something about the way he answered questions. No unnecessary details. No performance. Just enough truth. I liked that. An hour passed. Neither of us noticed. We talked about books, travel, music, the differences between Seoul and Accra, the similarities between Korean and Ghanaian family traditions, how both cultures respected elders, how both believed food could solve almost anything. By the time my phone buzzed, I had forgotten why I'd come to the cafe. The screen flashed. "Mr. Choi." I sighed. "I should go." He nodded. "I've probably stolen enough of your afternoon." "You didn't steal it." Another smile. Then silence. The kind where both people want to say one more thing. He solved it first. "Would you?" He stopped himself, then laughed. I was going to ask if you'd like coffee sometime. I looked down at the empty cup between us. We've just had coffee. His eyes widened. You're right. Another laugh. I should improve my timing. I couldn't help smiling. You could ask me to dinner instead. He blinked. I could. Another pause. Would you have dinner with me? I should have said no. I had rules. Rules my father never even needed to explain. No strangers. No unnecessary attention. No personal information. No relationships that hadn't been carefully evaluated. Instead, I heard myself say, I'd like that. When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped. A black Mercedes waited across the street, exactly where it always did. Mr. Choi stood beside the rear door, expression unreadable. As I approached, he opened an umbrella above my head. You are 17 minutes late. I know. His eyes studied me carefully. You seem. He searched for the word. Happy. I looked toward the cafe window. Kofi was packing his books. He looked up at exactly the same moment. Our eyes met through the glass. He smiled. Small. Almost shy. I smiled back. Then climbed into the car. Mr. Choi closed the door. The Mercedes pulled smoothly into Seoul traffic. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, he asked, Did something happen? I watched the cafe disappear into the distance. No. A small smile escaped before I could stop it. Something started. That evening, my father and I had dinner together. As we did every Tuesday, the dining room could comfortably seat 24 people. Only 2 chairs were occupied. He discussed shipping contracts, board meetings, political donations, international expansion. I listened, answered when spoken to, played my role perfectly. Halfway through dinner, he looked at me. You've smiled 3 times. I blinked. I have. You rarely smile during business discussions. I wasn't aware. He set down his chopsticks. What amused you? For one dangerous second, I almost told him. About the cafe. About cybersecurity. About the nurse in Ghana who taught her son that saving lives wasn't limited to hospitals. Instead, I said, I remembered something. He nodded once. Satisfied, the conversation returned to business. But later that night, standing alone on my balcony, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I opened the message. This is Kofi, the man who mistakenly invited you for coffee after we'd already had coffee. I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that escaped before permission. Another message appeared. I'd like to try again. Dinner this Friday? I promised to remember what meal we're eating this time. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed 3 words. Friday sounds perfect. I pressed send. Far below, Seoul shimmered beneath a sky full of city lights. Behind me, inside the penthouse, my father was still awake, reading reports, making decisions that shaped industries, believing he knew every important person in my life. He didn't know that less than 12 hours earlier, a quiet man with worn books and kind eyes had walked into a cafe, and without either of us realizing it, had quietly walked into my future. If you're already rooting for Ji-ah and Kofi, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're enjoying this slow burn journey, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the AfroK Tales. Because what neither of them knew was that someone had already noticed their first meeting. And in Kang Min-jae's world, nothing stayed hidden for long. Some fathers ask where you've been. My father already knew. I didn't understand that at 27. I thought privacy was something people simply had. I hadn't yet learned that daughters raised inside powerful families don't grow up with privacy. They grow up with the illusion of it. Friday arrived 3 days later. By 6 o'clock that evening, I had changed my outfit 4 times. Not because I was trying to impress Kofi, because I was trying not to. There is a difference. One comes from vanity, the other comes from fear. I settled on a cream-colored sweater, dark jeans, and a long camel coat. Simple, comfortable, forgettable, or so I hoped. When I walked downstairs, Mr. Choi was already waiting beside the car. He opened the rear door. Where to, Miss Kang? I hesitated. For 27 years, I had never lied to him. Not once. I'll be meeting a friend. He nodded. I'll have the driver wait. No. I looked at him. I'll take a taxi. For the first time in years, Mr. Choi frowned. A taxi? I'll be fine. The chairman prefers. I know what my father prefers. The words came out more sharply than I intended. Mr. Choi fell silent. After a long moment, he reached into his pocket and handed me a small business card. My personal number. I looked at it. You already have my number. I know. His expression softened just enough for me to notice. This is in case you need me. There were many things Mr. Choi never said. He had worked for my father for over 30 years. He had watched me grow up. He had attended my piano recitals, brought me medicine when I was sick, scolded me when I skipped breakfast before university exams. He wasn't family, but he had quietly occupied the space where family sometimes lived. I slipped the card into my purse. I won't be late. I know. He stepped aside, and for the first time since I was 16, I walked away without security. Kofi was already waiting, not inside the restaurant, outside, hands tucked into the pockets of a navy coat. The autumn wind stirred his hair as he looked down the street, checking every face that passed. Then he saw me. His entire expression changed. Not dramatically, just brightened, as if something good had finally arrived. You came. I said I would. I know. He smiled. I was still happy to see it happen. I laughed. I don't think anyone has ever complimented my punctuality before. It wasn't your punctuality. He opened the restaurant door. It was your company. The restaurant was small, family-owned. The owner greeted Kofi by name. You brought your friend. I did. The older woman looked at me before smiling knowingly. She's very pretty. Kofi rubbed the back of his neck. I noticed. I felt warmth rise to my cheeks. The owner laughed. I'll give you the window table. When she walked away, I looked at him. You come here often? Every Friday. Really? My mother used to call every Friday evening. His smile became quieter. Different time zones. We'd eat together over video call. Something in my chest tightened. Does she still call? He looked down at the menu for a second. She passed away 2 years ago. Silence settled gently between us. I'm sorry. So am I. He smiled again. But she'd be upset if every conversation about her became sad. What was she like? His eyes softened immediately. Impossible. I blinked. In the best way. He laughed. She believed every problem could be solved by feeding people. Even bad grades. Especially bad grades. I smiled. My mother believed music solved everything. What happened if music didn't work? She played louder. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Not because we had run out of things to say. Because remembering people we loved deserved a little silence. Dinner lasted almost 3 hours. Felt like 30 minutes. I learned that Kofi had studied computer engineering in Accra before earning a scholarship to Seoul National University. That he spoke Chui, English, Korean, and enough Japanese to survive business trips. That he hated wasting food. Loved old jazz records. And still called his older sister every Sunday without fail. He learned that I played piano. Collected old novels. Couldn't cook. Burned instant noodles twice. I didn't know that was possible. It shouldn't be. So how? I got distracted. Buy a book. He laughed so hard the people at the next table looked over. You burned water. I know. That's impressive. It isn't. It really is. By the time dessert arrived, I realized something that unsettled me. I hadn't thought about my father once. Not once. With Kofi, the constant pressure I carried simply disappeared. I wasn't Kang Min-jae's daughter. I wasn't the future of an empire. I wasn't someone whose schedule had been planned 6 months in advance. I was just Ji-ah. And somehow, that frightened me more than it should have. Outside, the air had turned colder. They walked slowly toward the subway station. I had a good time. I did too. He looked at me carefully. Can I ask you something? You can. Every time your phone vibrates. He hesitated. You become someone else. I stopped walking. What do you mean? You smile differently. I frowned. When we're talking. He searched for the words. You seem relaxed. But every time your phone lights up. His expression remained gentle. It's like you remember you're carrying something heavy. I stared at him. No one had ever noticed that. Not my university friends. Not colleagues. Not even myself. Yet this man, whom I'd known for less than a week, had seen it. I have a complicated family. He nodded. I guessed. You did. You wear responsibility the way some people wear expensive watches. I laughed quietly. What does that mean? It means. He looked up at the city lights. Even when you're happy, part of you is working. The words settled inside me. Because they were true. Painfully true. When they reached the station entrance, he stopped. I don't want to rush you. I looked at him. So I'll ask something simpler. He smiled. May I see you again? I answered before fear could interrupt. Yes. At exactly the same moment, 300 meters away, a black sedan remained parked across the street. The windows were dark. The engine idled quietly. Inside, 2 men watched them. One lowered a camera. I've got enough. The other nodded. Send it. Within seconds, several photographs traveled through an encrypted network. Ji-ah laughing. Ji-ah smiling. Ji-ah walking beside a tall African man. Ji-ah looking happier than she'd looked in years. The message contained only one sentence. The chairman's daughter has formed a personal relationship with the subject. Gangnam. 11:42 p.m. Kang Min-jae's private office. The chairman finished reading a financial report before placing it neatly on his desk. Mr. Choi entered without making unnecessary noise. There is something you should see. My father looked up. What is it? Mr. Choi placed a tablet before him. The first photograph appeared. Me. Laughing. My father studied the image. Long enough for the room to become uncomfortable. Who is he? Mr. Choi answered immediately. Kofi Mensah. Nationality. Ghanaian. What does he do? Cybersecurity engineer. Background. We're still investigating. My father swiped to the next photograph. I was smiling, looking at Kofi. The expression on my face was one he recognized immediately. Because once, many years ago, my mother had looked at him the same way. He placed the tablet face down. How long? Approximately 1 week. Another pause. Continue observing. Mr. Choi didn't move. The chairman wishes only to observe? My father leaned back slowly. What do you think I should do? Mr. Choi chose his words carefully. At the moment, your daughter has committed no wrongdoing. My father nodded once. Exactly. He looked toward the rain-covered windows. People reveal themselves with time. His voice remained calm. If the man is genuine, another pause. We'll know. And if he isn't? For the first time that night, something colder entered Kang Min-jae's eyes. Then my daughter will never know. Meanwhile, I lay awake in my apartment, looking at the ceiling, smiling for reasons I couldn't explain. My phone buzzed. A message from Kofi. Thank you for tonight. I smiled. Then another message arrived. Next Friday. I laughed softly before replying. You're becoming predictable. His answer came almost instantly. Only about the important things. I placed my phone on the bedside table, closed my eyes, and fell asleep believing the hardest part of falling in love was learning to trust someone. I was wrong. The hardest part would be convincing the man who had spent his entire life protecting me that the greatest danger I had ever faced was never Kofi. It was his own fear. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the AfroK Tales. Every like helps these stories reach more people who love slow-burn romance, family drama, and unforgettable twists. Because next Friday, Kofi was going to ask Ji-ah a question. And before she could answer, her father would make the first move. There are moments in life that divide time without asking permission. Not weddings, not funerals, not birthdays. Those are expected. The moments that truly change everything arrive disguised as ordinary evenings. A dinner reservation, a ringing phone, a man walking through the wrong door. By the time you realize what happened, your old life has already disappeared. The following Friday, Kofi texted me at exactly 9 a.m. I have a favor to ask. I smiled before opening the message. During the 2 weeks we'd known each other, I had discovered something about him. He never interrupted my workday unless it mattered. He respected time. Mine, his own, everyone else's. I replied, that depends on the favor. 3 dots appeared almost immediately, disappeared, returned. Finally, would you let me cook for you instead of taking you to dinner? I blinked. Cook? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed, you're brave. His reply came instantly. You haven't tasted my cooking yet. I'm reserving judgment. Another message. Good. Come hungry. I laughed quietly. Across the conference table, 3 executives stopped talking. One of them looked at me. Miss Kang. I looked up. I'm sorry. We were discussing the Singapore acquisition. I know. You smiled. I did. The executive nodded politely. It must be good news. I looked down at my phone again. For reasons I couldn't explain, it was. At 6:30 that evening, I arrived outside Kofi's apartment. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't even particularly modern. A 6-story brick building tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop in Yongsan. There was no private elevator, no marble lobby, no security detail, no doorman, just ordinary people coming home from work. For a moment, I stood on the sidewalk watching them. A father carrying his sleeping daughter, a university student struggling with groceries, an elderly couple arguing gently over whether they needed more rice. Felt peaceful. I realized then that I'd spent so much of my life surrounded by extraordinary wealth, that ordinary happiness had started to feel extraordinary instead. The apartment smelled like garlic, fresh bread, and something simmering slowly in a pot. Kofi opened the door wearing a dark blue sweater and an apron that read, "Trust me, I'm following the recipe." I laughed before I could stop myself. You're making fun of yourself. I'm managing expectations. He stepped aside. Come in. The apartment was small, warm. Books lined one wall from floor to ceiling. A piano stood beside the window. Not expensive, not polished, well-loved. You play. A little. He smiled. My mother insisted. My mother too. He looked at the piano. I think mothers secretly believe music makes people kinder. Do you? I think they were right. Dinner wasn't perfect. The bread was slightly overcooked. The rice needed more salt. The soup was incredible. Halfway through the meal, I looked around again. Every shelf held photographs. Family, friends, graduation, children from what looked like volunteer projects. None of them appeared staged. They looked lived. You don't have many pictures of yourself. Kofi followed my gaze. I prefer remembering other people. You never wanted your own? He shrugged. I'm usually the one taking them. Something about that answer stayed with me, because it told me something larger. Some people naturally place themselves at the center of every story. Others quietly become the reason everyone else remembers theirs. Kofi belonged to the second kind. After dinner, he carried 2 mugs of tea onto the balcony. The city stretched before them. The Han River reflected thousands of lights. It's beautiful. It is. He leaned lightly against the railing. But I still miss Accra sometimes. What do you miss most? My sister shouting across the house. He smiled. My nephews climbing trees they weren't supposed to climb. He laughed quietly. And thunderstorms. I looked at him. We have thunderstorms. Not like home. He looked toward the clouds. In Ghana, the rain announces itself. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Comfortable silence. Not empty. Comfortable. I realized something then. With him, silence never felt like pressure. Felt like trust. "Can I ask you something?" His voice interrupted my thoughts. "You've asked me that before." "I know. And every time." He smiled. "I get nervous anyway." "What is it?" He looked directly at me. "What are you afraid of?" The question surprised me. Most people asked what I wanted, or what I did, or where I'd studied. No one had ever asked me what frightened me. I thought carefully before answering. Disappointing people. He didn't interrupt. "So much of my life." I searched. "I'm listening." "When you meet Chairman Kang." His voice lowered slightly. "Answer honestly." Another pause. "Even if honesty costs you everything." He bowed politely, then turned. The security officers followed. Within seconds, the elevator doors closed, and they were gone. The apartment remained completely still. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Kofi looked at me. "How powerful is your father?" I closed my eyes. For the first time, I couldn't protect him with half-truths anymore. "Much more powerful," I whispered, "than you think." If you enjoyed this chapter, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the AfroK Tales. Every subscription helps the channel bring you more cinematic Afro-Korean romance stories with slow-burn tension and unforgettable twists. Because the next chapter changes everything. For the first time, Kofi Mensah would stand face-to-face with Kang Min-jae, and only one of them would leave that meeting believing the future could still be changed. There are two kinds of powerful men. The first announce their power before they enter a room. The second never have to. My father belonged to the second kind. Kofi, I would soon discover, belonged to a different kind entirely. The kind who didn't measure strength by how many people feared him, but by how many people felt safe around him. I didn't know then, those two definitions of power were about to collide. The meeting was scheduled for Sunday. 3 o'clock. Not a minute earlier. Not a minute later. That was my father. Precision wasn't a preference. It was respect. If someone arrived early, they were impatient. If they arrived late, they were careless. Exactly on time meant they understood the rules. At 2:47 p.m., my phone vibrated. I'm downstairs. I looked through my apartment window. Kofi stood beside the entrance wearing a charcoal suit. Simple, perfectly tailored. No flashy watch. No expensive designer logos. Just polished black shoes and quiet confidence. He looked up, saw me, and smiled. It was such a normal smile. The kind a man gives a woman he's excited to see. Not the smile of someone walking toward the most dangerous meeting of his life. "You didn't have to come." He held the passenger door open for me. "I know. You could have refused. I could have. So why didn't you?" He waited until I sat before closing the door, then walked around to the driver's seat. Only after the car merged into traffic did he answer. "Because he's your father." I stared at him. And anyone important to you," he kept his eyes on the road, "deserves the respect of a conversation, even if they don't return it." I looked out the window before he could see the emotion in my face. The Kang estate sat on a hill overlooking the Han River. 8 acres hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. Most people in Seoul knew it simply as the house on Biko Hill. They also knew never to stop outside it. The gates opened before we reached them. 2 black SUVs fell quietly into position behind us. Another joined ahead. Escort formation. Not because my father feared Kofi. Because my father never did anything halfway. As the convoy climbed the winding drive, Kofi glanced into the rearview mirror. Am I supposed to pretend this isn't intimidating? Despite everything, I laughed. A little. He smiled. I'll do my best. Mr. Choi met us at the entrance. As always, perfect posture, perfect timing. He bowed slightly. Mr. Mensah. Kofi is fine. Mr. Choi's expression softened almost invisibly. Very well. He turned to me. The chairman is waiting. I noticed something unusual. He wasn't carrying a tablet or a folder. No schedule. No notes. Nothing. Which meant my father intended this meeting to be personal. That frightened me more than if it had been business. The The study hadn't changed since I was a child. Dark walnut shelves, leather-bound books, a grand piano my mother used to play every Sunday evening. Her photograph still rested on the fireplace. She smiled in the picture. I wondered what she'd think of today. The doors opened. My father stood beside the windows overlooking the gardens, hands behind his back, exactly as he'd stood 1,000 times before. He didn't turn immediately. "Mr. Mensah," Kofi answered calmly. "Chairman Kang." Only then did my father face us. His eyes settled on Kofi, studying, measuring, calculating. The silence stretched. Almost a full minute. Most people broke under my father's silence. They filled it with nervous words, apologies, explanations. Kofi didn't. He simply waited, respectfully, patiently, without trying to rescue the moment. For the first time, I noticed something change in my father's expression. Not approval, interest. "You speak Korean well." My father spoke first. "I've had excellent teachers." "You've lived here almost 5 years. And before that?" "Accra." "What does your father do?" "He passed away when I was 19. No self-pity, no dramatic pause, just the truth. "I'm sorry." "So am I." Again, the room became quiet. My father gestured toward the seating area. "Sit." We did. Tea arrived within seconds. No servant spoke. No cup rattled. Every movement inside this house had been rehearsed by years of discipline. My father lifted his cup. "You understand who I am." "I do." "And yet," he looked directly at Kofi, "you continued seeing my daughter." "Yes." "Why?" Kofi answered immediately. "Because I care about her." My father nodded once. I expected that answer. Another sip of tea. "So let me ask a better question." He leaned forward slightly. "What can you offer her?" I felt myself tense. Here it was. The test. Money, status, power, everything my father measured. Kofi didn't answer immediately. He looked down at his teacup for a second, then back at my father. "I don't think those are things she needs." The room became very still. "What do you think she needs?" Kofi looked at me, only briefly, then answered. "Someone she doesn't have to perform for." Silence. My father's face remained unreadable. But mine, I knew exactly what mine revealed. Because no one had ever understood me so completely with so few words. My father set down his teacup. "You believe my daughter performs. I think she spent a long time carrying expectations. You've known her 3 weeks. I have. And in 3 weeks, my father's voice remained calm. "You believe you know her better than I do?" Kofi met his gaze. "No." Another pause. "I believe I know a different part of her." That answer surprised even me, because it wasn't arrogant. It was honest. My father noticed it too. "You earn." He named a figure. "A good salary. An excellent salary. For most people." Then he quietly named the annual operating budget of one of his companies. The number was almost 20 times higher. "Do you understand the difference?" "I do." "And?" Kofi smiled politely. "I wasn't aware we were competing." I looked sharply at him. My father did too. For one dangerous second, I thought everything had just ended. Then, something extraordinary happened. The corner of my father's mouth moved. Barely. Not a smile. Almost. He appreciated courage, even when he disliked the person showing it. "You have confidence. I have peace. What's the difference?" "Confidence depends on comparison." Kofi answered. "Peace doesn't." My father said nothing. He simply watched him, the way chess players study unexpected moves. After another long silence, my father stood. He walked toward the window. "The world is not kind." "No. It judges." "Yes. It punishes weakness." "It does." My father turned. "My daughter has never wanted for anything." "I know. Can you promise she'll never suffer with you?" Kofi's answer came quietly. "No." I stared at him. Even my father seemed surprised. "No. No." He folded his hands calmly. I can promise I'll stand beside her when she does. The words settled over the room. Heavy. Real. My father looked away first. Several minutes later, the meeting ended. No shouting. No threats. No approval. Just finished. As Mr. Choi escorted us toward the entrance, I finally breathed again. I whispered. That went better than expected. Kofi smiled. I don't know. What do you mean? He looked back toward the house. Your father asked almost nothing about me. I frowned. Isn't that good? No. His voice became thoughtful. It means. He'd already learned everything before I arrived. A chill ran through me, because I knew he was right. Inside the study, my father remained standing by the window. Mr. Choi entered quietly. What are your thoughts, Chairman? My father didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the gates where Kofi's car disappeared down the hill. Finally, he spoke. He isn't pretending. No. He isn't intimidated. No. He isn't after money. No. Another long silence. Mr. Choi allowed himself one careful question. Then, why do I feel you've already decided against him? My father's answer came so softly, it almost disappeared into the room. Because sometimes prejudice doesn't need evidence. It only needs fear. Mr. Choi looked at him. For the first time in 32 years, he wanted to challenge the man he'd devoted his life to serving. But loyalty can be as heavy as love. So instead, he lowered his head and remained silent. Meanwhile, as Kofi drove me home, neither of us noticed the motorcycle following at a distance, or the camera hidden inside the rider's helmet, or the encrypted message being typed at that very moment. Confirmation received. The chairman's daughter has become emotionally attached. Proceed to phase 2. If this meeting surprised you, hit the like button and subscribe to the AfroK Tales. The story is only getting deeper, and the next chapter introduces a danger that neither Ji-ah nor Kofi sees coming. Because someone else had been watching their relationship from the beginning, and unlike Kang Min-jae, they didn't want to separate them. They wanted to use them. Sometimes the most dangerous people aren't the ones standing in front of you. They're the ones quietly taking notes from the shadows. While my father was trying to decide whether Kofi was worthy of me, someone else had already decided we were useful. Useful people rarely stay alive for long. The following Monday began like every other Monday in the Kang household. At precisely 7:30, my father sat at the head of the breakfast table. A fresh newspaper rested beside his tea. His schedule for the week lay neatly arranged on a leather folder. At exactly 7:32, I entered the dining room. We had eaten breakfast together every Monday since I was 13. No matter how busy he became, no matter what country he returned from, Monday breakfast was one tradition he never abandoned. He looked up briefly. You were late getting home. I unfolded my napkin. By 18 minutes. You counted. I always count. There was no accusation in his voice. Only observation. That was my father. He believed numbers told the truth long before people did. For a while we ate in silence. Then he placed his chopsticks down. I met Mr. Mensah. You did. I found him. He paused just long enough to make me wonder. Interesting. I looked at him. Interesting. Coming from Kang Min-jae, that was practically a compliment. He speaks well. Yes. He thinks before answering. Yes. He isn't intimidated by authority. No. My father nodded slowly. I noticed. Hope stirred quietly inside me. Perhaps this could still work. Perhaps my father only needed time. Then he reached into his jacket and placed a thin folder on the table. My name was printed across the front. Kang Ji-ah. I frowned. What is this? A future. My stomach tightened. I didn't open it. I already knew. There's a charity gala next month. He continued calmly. The Han group will be attending. I looked at him. Their eldest son recently returned from Boston. I closed my eyes. No, you haven't even looked. I don't need to. He is well educated. No. He comes from an excellent family. No. He will inherit. I said no. The word escaped louder than I'd intended. The dining room fell completely still. Even the staff stopped moving. My father looked at me for a long moment, then quietly asked, "Is it him?" I answered honestly, "Yes." Across the city, Kofi had no idea that breakfast conversation was happening. He was standing inside a children's hospital. Not in a boardroom. Not in an office. In the pediatric wing. A little girl with braided hair sat beside him holding a tablet. "Try again." She frowned. "It still doesn't work." "It will." He smiled. "Computers are stubborn. So are you." He laughed. "My sister says the same thing." The little girl giggled. Her mother watched from the doorway. "You don't have to keep volunteering," she said softly. "You already fixed the system." Kofi shook his head. "I promised Mina we'd finish her coding lesson." The little girl grinned proudly. "I'm going to make video games." "You are. And when you do," he gently tapped her laptop, "remember to make them difficult enough that old people like me can't win." "You're not old." "I'm 31. She gasped dramatically. "That's ancient." The hallway filled with laughter. He had no idea that 2 floors below, a man wearing a maintenance uniform wasn't repairing anything. He was taking photographs. One picture, then another, then another. He sent them immediately. Subject volunteers every Monday. Children's hospital. Routine confirmed. Meanwhile, Mr. Choi entered my father's office carrying another report. The background investigation. My father accepted the folder. Inside were dozens of pages. Education, employment, travel history, financial records, volunteer work, tax documents, even childhood newspaper clippings from Ghana. For almost an hour, he read without speaking. Finally, he closed the folder. "Nothing." Mr. Choi looked up. "Chairman, there is nothing. No criminal record. No financial irregularities. No suspicious transfers. No hidden debts. No gambling. No drugs. No affairs." My father frowned slightly. "No one is this clean." Mr. Choi answered carefully. "Perhaps. He's simply a good man." Silence. Then my father said something so quietly, Mr. Choi almost didn't hear it. "I've forgotten what one looks like." That evening, Kofi called me. "You sound tired." "I am." "Work?" "My father." He laughed gently. "I was hoping you wouldn't say that." "I wish I hadn't." We talked for almost an hour. About nothing important. Movies, books, the weather. By the time we hung up, the heaviness I'd carried all day had lifted. 3 days later, the first attack came. Not against me. Against Kofi. His company's servers were hit just after midnight. A sophisticated breach. Whoever was behind it knew exactly where to strike. Firewalls, backups, client databases. The kind of attack designed not just to steal information, but to destroy trust. Kofi spent 14 straight hours fighting it. By morning, he had stopped the breach. Almost. One server remained compromised. He stared at the unfamiliar code. Something about it felt wrong. Too precise. Too expensive. This wasn't the work of ordinary hackers. Someone had paid professionals. Across the Han River, in an abandoned warehouse, a man removed his headphones and smiled. "The first move is complete." Another man looked over. "Did we get what we needed?" "No. The engineer is better than expected." "What now?" The first man folded his laptop shut. "We continue." "The daughter." He smiled. "Everyone believes the daughter is the target." A pause. "She isn't." "The father." "No." Another pause. "The African." That same night, my phone rang just after midnight. It wasn't Kofi. It was Mr. Choi. "Miss Kong." His voice sounded unusually tense. "Where are you?" "Home." "Stay there." "What happened?" A pause. Then, The chairman's intelligence team intercepted communications. My heartbeat quickened. What kind of communications? We don't know yet. But your name appeared. And Mr. Mensah's. Silence filled the apartment. Finally I whispered, "What does that mean?" Mr. Choi answered with frightening honesty. "It means you may no longer be the only people interested in your relationship." Outside my apartment, hidden beneath the shadow of a tree, a motorcycle engine started quietly. The rider looked up toward my window, then spoke into a small microphone. Visual confirmation. A calm voice answered through the earpiece. Maintain surveillance. The rider smiled beneath his helmet. They have no idea. No. The voice replied. They're looking at the wrong enemy. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Backhand index pointing right, do you think Ji-ah's father will protect Kofi? Or become the greatest danger to him? Subscribe to the AfroK Tales because in the next chapter, everything changes. For the first time, Kofi realizes someone is hunting him. And when Kang Min-jae discovers who ordered the attack, even he will understand that this is no longer about race. It's about survival. There are moments when the people who love us most become the people who hurt us the deepest, not because they stopped loving us, but because they believed pain was the only language left that could keep us alive. I didn't know that yet. Standing in my father's office, I only knew that he was looking at me with the same unreadable expression he'd worn my entire life. And somehow, that frightened me more than anger ever had. The summons came 2 days after Mr. Choi's midnight phone call. No explanation, no schedule, just one sentence. The chairman requests your presence immediately. I knew better than to ask why. When I arrived at the estate, the atmosphere felt different. Security had doubled. Vehicles I didn't recognize lined the circular driveway. Men in dark suits spoke quietly into earpieces. Something had happened, or was about to. Mr. Choi met me at the entrance. His usually composed face looked older. You should prepare yourself. For what? He hesitated. It was the first time in years I'd seen him hesitate. The chairman has made a decision. My father stood alone in the main hall. No tea, no paperwork, no phone, just silence. You asked for me. I did. His voice was calm. Too calm. I've spent the last 48 hours reviewing intelligence. I waited. There is now credible information that several rival organizations know about your relationship. A chill moved through me. How? We don't know. Lies. He looked directly at me. We know. A long pause. We simply haven't found the leak. What does that have to do with me? Everything. He walked toward the large family portrait hanging above the fireplace. My mother smiled from the canvas. I stood beside her, 10 years old, still believing adults could solve every problem. My father looked at the portrait for a long time. When your mother died, his voice softened. I made myself one promise. I didn't interrupt. I would never bury my child. The words landed somewhere deep inside me. Before I could answer, he turned. His expression had become Chairman Kang's again. Not my father. The relationship ends today. No. You will not contact him again. No. You will leave Seoul if necessary. No. Every answer came faster, stronger, until finally, I love him. The room became impossibly quiet. It was the first time I'd ever said those words aloud. Not to Kofi, to my father. His eyes closed for one brief second. When they opened again, they looked almost empty. So be it. He reached into his jacket, removed a folded document, placed it on the table. I have signed the necessary papers. I looked down. My breath stopped. Declaration of family separation. My name, my signature line, my father's seal. I stared at the page without understanding. What? My voice broke. Is this? You are no longer my daughter. The sentence echoed through the hall. Not because it was loud, because it was quiet. Quiet so complete, it erased the air around it. I laughed once. A small broken sound. This isn't funny. It isn't. You don't mean it. I do. No. I shook my head. No, you don't. He didn't move. Didn't explain. Didn't comfort me. I have transferred an appropriate financial settlement. I don't want your money. The house in Busan has been removed from your name. I don't care. Your company position is terminated effective immediately. I never wanted it. Each sentence cut away another piece of the life I'd always known, until there was almost nothing left. Finally, he spoke the words I would remember for the rest of my life. If you choose that man, he looked directly into my eyes. You choose a life that no longer includes this family. Something inside me shattered. Not loudly, quietly, like glass breaking underwater. I searched his face desperately, looking for hesitation, regret, anything. There was nothing. Only the chairman. Never my father. Not anymore. Mr. Choi stood near the doorway. His hands were folded, his expression unchanged. But when our eyes met, for just a fraction of a second, I saw something I'd never seen before. Pain. Real pain. As if he wanted to say something. Anything. Instead, he bowed his head. I'm sorry, Miss Kang. He had called me Miss Kang. Not young Mississippi. Not Ji-ah. Formal. Distant. Finished. I left the estate carrying one small suitcase. No security followed. No staff said goodbye. The gates closed behind me with slow mechanical precision. I stood on the sidewalk outside the only home I'd ever known. For the first time since I was 6 years old, I had nowhere to go. An hour later, Kofi opened his apartment door. The moment he saw my face, he understood. He didn't ask questions. Didn't demand explanations. He simply stepped aside. Come in. I walked inside, set the suitcase down. Then finally, after holding myself together through every word my father had spoken, I broke. Not elegantly, not quietly. I cried with the helplessness of someone who had just lost an entire life. Kofi crossed the room, wrapped his arms around me, said only one sentence. You don't have to be strong tonight. And somehow, that made me cry even harder. Much later, when the apartment had grown quiet, I told him everything. The documents, the inheritance, the company, the words. You are no longer my daughter. When I finished, he remained silent for a long time. Finally, he asked softly, Do you believe him? I wiped my eyes. I don't know. He nodded slowly. I don't. I looked at him. What? I don't believe a father stops loving his daughter in one afternoon. He did. No. His voice remained gentle. He may have done something terrible, but I don't believe that's the same thing. The following morning, every major business newspaper carried the same headline. Chairman Kang publicly removes only daughter from family succession. Social media exploded. Television analysts debated it. Financial markets reacted. Some said it was because of business. Others whispered about scandal. By evening, the truth, or what people believed was the truth, had spread across Seoul. She was disowned for dating an African man. The comments were cruel. Some defended us. Many didn't. My phone buzzed endlessly. Friends disappeared. Business contacts stopped answering. Invitations were quietly withdrawn. In less than 24 hours, I learned how quickly society could confuse wealth with worth. That night, inside the Kang estate, Mr. Choi entered the chairman's study. My father hadn't moved from his chair in nearly 3 hours. The untouched dinner tray sat beside him. You haven't eaten. I'm not hungry. Mr. Choi remained standing. You were harsher than necessary. No, the chairman answered without looking up. I was exactly harsh enough. Silence. Then, Mr. Choi asked the question no one else dared. Will she ever know? My father's hands tightened almost imperceptibly. Not until she's safe. Outside, rain began falling against the windows. Inside, for the first time in decades, Kang Min-jae allowed himself exactly 5 seconds. 5 silent seconds, to mourn the daughter he had just pretended to lose. People think heartbreak is loud. It isn't. Heartbreak is quiet. It is waking up and reaching for a phone, before remembering there's no one left to call. It is walking into a room and forgetting that it no longer belongs to you. It is learning that grief isn't one moment. It's 1,000 ordinary moments that suddenly become unbearable. For the next 3 weeks, I stopped being Kang Ji-ah. At least, that's what the world believed. The headlines moved on. The gossip found someone else. But the damage stayed. My corporate email no longer existed. My office access card was deactivated. My bank accounts connected to the Kang Family Trust had been frozen. Luxury brands that once greeted me by name suddenly treated me like a stranger. One boutique manager actually said, "I'm sorry, miss, have we met before?" I looked at her for a long second. 6 months earlier, she had reserved handbags before they were released because she knew I liked quiet colors. Now, she didn't recognize me. Or perhaps, she simply couldn't afford to. Kofi watched all of it. He never commented on the people who disappeared. Never criticized my father. Never once said, "I told you so." Instead, he did something far more dangerous. He treated me exactly the same. On Friday evenings, he still brought home flowers from the elderly woman outside Yongsan Station. Not expensive roses, wildflowers, because he remembered I'd once said they looked happier. On Saturday mornings, he still made coffee exactly the way I liked it. Too much milk. 1 spoon of honey. He never asked if I missed my old life. Because somehow, he understood I wasn't mourning the money. I was mourning my father. One rainy afternoon, I found him repairing an old dining chair. "You know you can buy a new one." He smiled without looking up. "I know. Then why fix it?" He tightened one of the screws. "My grandfather used to say, if something has carried your weight, you don't throw it away because it became weak." He looked at me. "You repair it." The words stayed with me, because they weren't about the chair. They were about people. Across the city, Chairman Kang sat inside a secure conference room. Only 3 people were present. Mr. Choi, Ryu Jin, the head of security, and the chairman. A digital map of Seoul covered one wall. Red markers blinked across the screen. "Report." Ryu pressed a button. "We've confirmed surveillance on Mr. Mensah." Photographs appeared. Kofi leaving work. Kofi buying groceries. Kofi walking me home. Every movement. Every route. Every routine. Chairman Kang's face hardened. "Who?" "We believe it's the Biko Syndicate." The room became still. Mr. Choi slowly looked up. "They've crossed into Seoul?" Ryu nodded. 3 weeks ago. Chairman Kang spoke quietly. "They're not watching my daughter." "No. They're watching him." Mr. Choi frowned. "Why?" Ryu changed the image. A shipping manifest appeared. Then financial records. Then satellite photographs. Finally, a face. A man in his early 50s. Silver hair. Cold eyes. Chairman Victor Asare. Mr. Choi recognized the name immediately. The Ghanaian Shipping Consortium. Ryu nodded. Officially. Unofficially. One of the largest criminal logistics networks operating between West Africa and East Asia. Chairman Kang looked at the screen. "What connection does he have to Kofi?" "We don't know. But they've been watching him for months. Months. Before Ji-ah. Before the relationship. Before the dinner." Chairman Kang's instincts sharpened immediately. "This isn't about my daughter." "No," Ryu answered. "It never was." That evening, I noticed the black SUV again. The same one. Across the street. Engine running. Windows tinted. "Kofi." He looked up from his laptop. "What?" "That car." He walked to the window. Studied it. "It was outside your office yesterday." "I know. And the cafe before that." "I know." I slowly turned toward him. "You knew." He nodded once. "I've known for about 10 days. My heartbeat quickened. "You didn't tell me." "I wanted to be certain." "Were you?" He looked back toward the street. "They rotate drivers every 6 hours. They change vehicles every 2 days. They never get closer than 80 meters. He smiled faintly. "They're professionals." Cold spread through my chest. Kofi, someone's following us. He nodded. Yes. That same moment, the man inside the SUV lowered a pair of binoculars. He pressed his earpiece. They've noticed. A voice answered. Expected. Proceed. Not yet. When? A pause. Then, when the chairman makes his move. 2 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Hello. Silence. Then, my father's voice. Ji-ah. I froze. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he asked one question. Are you safe? I closed my eyes. Safe? After everything? You don't get to ask me that. Silence. Then, answer the question. Something in his voice, something beneath the control, made me hesitate. Yes. Another pause. Is he with you? Kofi? Yes. Yes. A slow breath came through the phone. Good. The line went dead. No goodbye. No explanation. Just gone. I stared at the phone. What was that? Kofi asked. I looked at him. I don't know. What I didn't know was that my father hadn't called from his office. He had called from inside an armored command vehicle, parked less than 300 meters away. Through binoculars, he watched our apartment building, watched the entrances, watched the rooftops, watched every parked vehicle. Mr. Choi stood beside him. You should tell her. Chairman Kang didn't answer. You should tell her why you disowned her. Still, silence. Finally, he spoke. If she knows, she'll come back. And if she comes back, his eyes remained fixed on the building. They'll stop looking at her. They'll start shooting. At that exact moment, a sniper settled onto the rooftop of an abandoned warehouse. 600 meters away, a suppressed rifle rested against the concrete ledge. The crosshairs moved slowly, not toward Ji-ah, toward Kofi. The sniper whispered into his microphone. I have visual. A voice replied. Wait. The crosshairs steadied over Kofi's chest as he stood near the apartment window. The sniper slowed his breathing, finger tightening. Halfway. Then, a black sedan suddenly accelerated into the alley below. Doors burst open. 4 armed men emerged. Not attacking. Protecting. The sniper frowned. What? Before he finished, a bullet shattered the concrete beside his head. Another sniper, hidden on a different rooftop. The first sniper rolled away just as 3 more shots ripped across the roof. His earpiece exploded with shouting. Abort! Abort! Chairman Kang's counter-team. The assassin disappeared into the darkness. The shot at Kofi never came. Inside the apartment, neither Kofi nor I heard any of it. We simply looked out the window, wondering why so many black cars had suddenly appeared on the street. Far away, Chairman Kang lowered his binoculars. Ryu approached quietly. They're retreating. Chairman Kang nodded once. Good. Mr. Choi looked at him. You saved him. Chairman Kang kept watching the apartment. No, he answered softly. I saved my daughter. If this chapter gave you chills, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment protect them below. Every like helps the AfroK tales reach more viewers who love cinematic romance with emotional twist. There is a strange kind of fear, the fear of discovering that your entire life has been built on a lie. Not because someone deceived you, but because someone loved you enough to keep the truth from you. The morning after the attempted assassination, Kofi couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not with Ji-ah, with himself. He replayed every detail from the past month. The black SUV, the strangers outside his office, the cyber attack, the phone that always seemed to ring just before something happened. None of it fit. He had built software. He volunteered at a children's hospital. He paid his taxes. He had never belonged to anyone's war. So why did professional killers know his name? At 9 o'clock, he arrived at his office. His business partner, Daniel, was already waiting. He looked pale, sleep-deprived. Kofi, you look terrible. Daniel didn't smile. You need to see this. He plugged a flash drive into the conference room computer. a security recording appeared. The timestamp read, 2:14 a.m., 3 nights earlier. The company parking garage. The footage showed 2 men entering. Neither wore masks, neither hurried. Professionals. One walked directly toward Kofi's car, the other toward the building's electrical room. Daniel paused the video. Watch. The first man crouched beside the vehicle. 30 seconds later, he walked away. What am I looking at? Daniel enlarged the image. A small black device, magnetically attached beneath the driver's seat. Kofi's face changed. A tracker. Daniel nodded. We found it this morning. Silence. Whoever they are. Daniel swallowed. They've been following you long before Ji-ah. That sentence refused to leave Kofi's mind. Long before Ji-ah. If that was true, then everything changed. That evening, he called someone he hadn't spoken to in almost 4 years. His aunt, Kofi Mensah. She answered on the second ring. Kofi? Her voice immediately filled with concern. Is everything all right? I need to ask you something. A pause. About my father. The silence on the other end lasted too long. Auntie, what aren't you telling me? Thousands of kilometers away, in Accra, Amma closed the curtains before speaking. She checked the front gate, locked the kitchen door. Only then did she return to the phone. I prayed, she whispered, that this day would never come. Kofi's heart began to race. What day? The day they found you. He sat down slowly. What do you mean? Found me? Another long silence. Then, his aunt began. You were 12 years old. Your father had just accepted a position managing shipping operations at Timaport. He was an honest man. He believed paperwork should match cargo. She laughed sadly. That made him unpopular. One evening, his father discovered 3 shipping containers that officially didn't exist. No customs records. No inspection certificates. No declared owners. He reported them. 3 days later, the containers disappeared. So did the men who'd unloaded them. A week later, his father was dead. Officially, a traffic accident. Unofficially, everyone in Tima knew better. Kofi couldn't breathe. You told me. It was an accident. We lied. Why? To keep you alive. His aunt continued. The men responsible believed your father had copied documents. They searched the house. They questioned everyone. They never found anything. Because... She began crying softly. He'd hidden them where no one would think to look. Kofi whispered. Where? In your school backpack. The world stopped. You carried those papers for almost 6 months. You didn't even know. When we discovered them, we burned every page. We changed your schools. We moved cities. And when you won the scholarship to Korea, we thanked God. We believed. You were finally safe. Kofi stared at the wall. None of it made sense. If the papers were destroyed, why are they still looking for me? His aunt answered with one sentence. Because criminals rarely believe honest people. They think your father made copies. And they think he gave them to you. The call ended an hour later. Kofi remained sitting in complete silence. Everything he believed about his childhood had changed. Across Seoul, Chairman Kang received another intelligence report. Ryu entered quickly. We've identified the organization. Chairman Kang looked up. Who? The Black Coast Syndicate. The room became still. Mr. Choi slowly removed his glasses. I thought they disappeared years ago. So did everyone. Ryu placed another photograph on the desk. A silver-haired man. Cold eyes. Chairman Victor Asare. They're rebuilding. And they believe. Ryu looked directly at the chairman. Kofi Mensah possesses evidence capable of destroying their international network. Chairman Kang leaned back. So this has nothing to do with my empire. No. They simply crossed into your territory. A dangerous silence followed. Finally, Chairman Kang spoke. They made one mistake. What mistake? They assumed. His eyes hardened. That because I disowned my daughter. I stopped protecting her. That same night, I found Kofi sitting alone on the apartment balcony. No lights, just the city. He looked older somehow. Not physically, emotionally. I sat beside him. You've been quiet. He nodded. My aunt called. He told me everything. His father, the shipping containers, the murder, the lies. When he finished, I reached for his hand. He looked at me. I don't even know who I am anymore. I squeezed his fingers gently. I do. He smiled weakly. You make that sound easy. It isn't. I looked out at the city. But I know this. The man sitting beside me isn't responsible for someone else's crimes. He looked at me for a long moment. Then, for the first time since we'd met, he rested his forehead against mine. No words, just shared silence. Neither of us noticed the tiny red laser that briefly appeared on the apartment wall behind us, then disappeared. Someone was measuring distance, calculating angles, preparing. Far across the river, the sniper lowered his scope. He smiled. This time, he whispered, no one will stop me. There is a difference between an enemy and a man who refuses to explain himself. From a distance, they look exactly the same. The difference only becomes clear when the bullets start flying. 3 days passed without incident. Too quiet. People imagine danger as constant movement. It isn't. Professionals become nervous when everything becomes peaceful. Peace usually means someone is waiting. Kofi noticed it first. The cars are gone. I looked through the apartment window. The black SUV that had been parked across the street for weeks was gone. The motorcycle, gone. Even the old delivery van that seemed to appear every afternoon, gone. It feels wrong. He nodded. It does. That afternoon, Mr. Choi stood inside Chairman Kang's private office. Ryu entered without knocking. Chairman, what is it? They've disappeared. Chairman Kang looked up immediately. All of them. Every surveillance team. Silence. Then, for the first time in years, Chairman Kang swore under his breath. Mr. Choi understood instantly. They're not watching anymore. Ryu nodded. They're moving. At exactly 6:40 p.m., Kofi left the apartment. I'll be back in 20 minutes. He held up an empty grocery bag. We're out of rice. I can go. He smiled. You've had meetings all day. I'll be faster. I know. He kissed my forehead. But let me do something ordinary. Those were the last words he spoke before everything changed. The neighborhood market was only 4 blocks away. Families filled the sidewalks. Children chased one another between cafes. Office workers waited at traffic lights. Normal. Completely normal. Which was exactly why the first shot shocked everyone. The sound wasn't loud. A suppressor turned it into little more than a sharp crack. The flower pot beside Kofi exploded. Concrete dust filled the air. Every instinct he'd developed over years of military training with his father, years of security awareness from simply living carefully, took over. He dropped instantly. Down. People screamed. A second shot shattered the supermarket window. Glass rained across the sidewalk. Children cried. Cars slammed on their brakes. Chaos. 2 rooftops away, the sniper adjusted his scope. Target moving. Another voice answered through his earpiece. Finish it. Kofi sprinted toward a concrete support column. Another shot. Too close. The bullet tore through his jacket sleeve. Not flesh. Fabric. Barely. His heart pounded. This wasn't intimidation. This was execution. Inside the Kang estate, every emergency phone began ringing at once. Ryu answered the first. His face changed instantly. Chairman. Chairman Kang stood before Ryu finished speaking. What happened? Shots fired. Where? He named the district. My district. Chairman Kang didn't hesitate. Moo. Kofi looked around in disbelief. This wasn't coincidence. They had arrived too quickly. Almost as if they'd been waiting. Then he saw him. Chairman Kang stepped out of the lead vehicle. No body armor. No hesitation. His eyes immediately found Kofi. For one brief second, relief crossed his face. Real relief. It vanished before anyone else noticed. But Kofi saw it. Chairman Kang walked directly toward him. You've been hit. No. Anywhere. No. Chairman Kang looked him over personally, checking his shoulder, his arm, the torn sleeve. Only after confirming there was no blood did he step back. Their eyes met. For the first time, there was no hostility between them, only exhaustion. Kofi spoke quietly. You knew. Chairman Kang didn't answer. You knew someone was hunting me. Silence. You've known for weeks. Another silence. Finally, Chairman Kang said, longer. Before Kofi could ask another question, a scream echoed from the opposite side of the street. I had arrived. Someone had called me after hearing the gunfire. I ran through the police barricade. Kofi! He turned. Our eyes met. Relief flooded through me. Then, everything slowed. A motorcycle shot out from a side street. Not escaping. Charging. The passenger stood. An assault rifle appeared. Not aimed at Kofi. Not at me. Chairman Kang. Time fractured. People froze. Security shouted. But the motorcycle was too close. Too fast. Chairman Kang reached instinctively for me, trying to push me behind him. The rifle opened fire. Kofi moved first. Without thinking. Without calculating. He slammed Chairman Kang sideways. The burst of bullets ripped through the space where the chairman had been standing half a second earlier. 3 rounds shattered the SUV windshield. One struck a traffic light. Another hit the pavement. The motorcycle sped away. Silence. Heavy. Impossible silence. Chairman Kang found himself on the ground. Alive. Because the man he'd rejected had just saved his life. Neither man spoke. Neither needed to. The truth stood between them. Simple. Undeniable. Kofi hadn't protected him because he wanted approval. He hadn't protected him because of money, or power, or obligation. He'd protected him because that's who he was. Chairman Kang slowly stood. He looked at Kofi for a long moment, then quietly said, You've just made my greatest mistake impossible to ignore. Kofi frowned. What mistake? Chairman Kang looked toward me, then back at Kofi. My mistake, his voice almost broke, was believing I understood your character before I understood your heart. Before either man could say another word, Mr. Choi's phone rang. He answered. His expression changed instantly. Chairman, what is it? They've breached the estate. Everyone froze. They've taken. A pause. Then the words that changed everything. Your late wife's private vault. Chairman Kang's face went completely still. Only 3 people in the world knew what was inside that vault. Chairman Kang, Mr. Choi, and my late mother, which meant only one thing. The enemy hadn't come for money. They had come for a secret. You can subscribe to the AfroK Tales to continue watching beautiful stories like this one. Some people leave behind money. Some leave behind property. My mother, Mr. Choi spoke softly. The Black Coast Syndicate had been disguising human trafficking operations as humanitarian shipments. My stomach turned. They were moving children. Yes. My father closed his eyes briefly. Your mother wanted to expose them. Kofi's father agreed to help. Kofi whispered, and they killed him. No one answered, because no one needed to. They tried to kill your mother too, Mr. Choi continued. But she escaped. She returned to Korea. She brought every document she could carry. Those documents became the foundation of everything we built afterward. I looked at my father. What do you mean? His voice became colder. I spent the next 20 years dismantling every shipping route connected to that organization. You thought it was business. He looked directly at me. It wasn't. It was revenge. Silence filled the room. The empire I'd spent my entire life judging hadn't only been built through ambition. Part of it had been built through war. But why keep it secret? I asked. Why not tell the police? My father almost smiled. The police. He walked slowly toward the broken vault. The organization had governments, judges, customs officials, politicians. You don't destroy people like that. By filing paperwork. Kofi remained staring at the old photograph. My father died trying to protect those children. Yes. Chairman Kang answered quietly. He did. Kofi looked at him. You knew. For 20 years. Yes. You knew who my father was. Yes. You knew who I was. Another pause. I suspected. Anger flashed across Kofi's face. You let me believe my father died in a car accident. Chairman Kang didn't defend himself. I did. Why? Because every child connected to that investigation disappeared. You were the only one who survived. If you had known, you would have searched. And if you searched, they would have found you. Kofi looked away, unable to speak. I suddenly understood something. I turned toward my father. The journal. He nodded. It contained every original name, every witness, every survivor. And now, Mr. Choi finished quietly. It's in the hands of the people who murdered Kofi's father. A cold silence settled over the room. Then, Ryu's radio crackled. Sir. What? We've intercepted a message. He listened. His face lost all color. What is it? Ryu swallowed. They've released a video. A television switched on. The image was grainy. Dark warehouse. Concrete floor. A single chair. An elderly woman sat tied to it. Kofi stopped breathing. Aunt Amma. She looked frightened, but alive. A masked man stepped into frame. His distorted voice filled the room. Chairman Kang. You've protected the wrong man. You've hidden the wrong truth. You have 48 hours. Bring us Kofi Mensah, or the woman dies. The screen went black. No one moved. No one spoke. Finally, Kofi turned toward Chairman Kang. His face had become completely calm. The kind of calm that only appears after someone has made a decision. I'm going. I grabbed his arm. No. They want me. They'll kill you. They'll kill her anyway if I don't. Chairman Kang stood slowly. His voice carried through the room like steel. No. Kofi looked at him. I won't allow it. You don't have a choice. I do. The chairman stepped closer. For the first time since we'd met, he looked at Kofi, not as the man dating his daughter, not as an outsider, but as the son of the man who had once stood beside his wife. My wife trusted your father, he said quietly. Your father died protecting innocent children. I will not allow his son to die alone. The room fell silent. Then Chairman Kang looked at everyone present. Ryu, Mr. Choi, his security commanders. Finally, and me. For 20 years, I fought this war by myself. He looked back at Kofi. No longer. He extended his hand. Not as chairman. Not as a mafia boss. As a man. As an equal. Kofi looked at the offered hand. Then slowly, reached forward, and shook it. For the first time, the two men stood on the same side. And somewhere, if my mother and Kofi's father were watching, perhaps they smiled. There are moments when a man stops asking whether he will survive and starts asking only one question. Who survives because I didn't run? That was the question in the room. Not spoken. Understood. Nobody argued anymore. Not because the danger had become smaller. Because it had become clear. Aunt Amma had 48 hours. Maybe less. The Black Coast Syndicate had stolen my mother's journal. They had Kofi's last living family. And they believed they finally held every piece they needed. They were wrong. Chairman Kang stood at the head of the operations table. The room looked less like a mansion and more like a military command center. Satellite images covered 3 monitors. Shipping manifests filled another. Maps of Seoul. Maps of Incheon Port. Maps of Busan. Red circles connected locations like threads in a web. Ryu spoke first. We traced the video. Where? A warehouse. He changed the screen. Dock 17. Incheon Port. Kofi frowned. Too obvious. Ryu nodded. It is. They want us to think she's there. So where is she really? Mr. Choi stepped forward. They're professionals. They never keep hostages where they negotiate. He pointed to another location. This, a smaller private freight terminal. Almost forgotten. No passenger traffic. Very little customs activity. The journal was tracked here 2 hours ago. Chairman Kang looked at Kofi. What would your father have noticed? The question surprised everyone, including Kofi. He studied the maps. For almost a full minute, no one interrupted. Then, he pointed. Neither. Everyone looked at him. If they're rebuilding trafficking routes, they'll need refrigeration units, medical storage, containers that inspectors rarely open. He pointed farther south. This terminal. Silence. Ryu typed rapidly, then looked up. His expression changed. Chairman, Kofi is right. Pause filled the room. Then something unexpected happened. Chairman Kang smiled. Barely. The smallest smile. My wife always said, the smartest people in a room rarely raise their voices. He looked at Kofi. She would have liked you. I saw Kofi lower his eyes. That sentence affected him more than he wanted anyone to know. The plan came together quickly. 3 teams. Team 1. Ryu would assault the visible warehouse. Create noise. Draw attention. Team 2. Chairman Kang himself would intercept the convoy expected to flee toward the harbor. Team 3. Only 2 people. Kofi and me. Our mission wasn't combat. It was rescue. Find Aunt Amma. Get her out. I don't like it. Chairman Kang looked directly at me. You won't be armed. I know. Then why assign us? Kofi answered before he could. Because they expect soldiers. They won't expect family. Chairman Kang studied him for a second, then nodded. Correct. Before anyone moved, Mr. Choi entered carrying something wrapped in dark cloth. He placed it carefully on the table. What is it? Chairman Kang unfolded the cloth. Inside lay a simple silver watch. Old, scratched. The leather strap had almost worn through. Kofi stared. I know that watch. Chairman Kang nodded. It belonged to your father. The room fell silent. My wife recovered it after. He stopped. After the attack. She kept it. She always believed. One day she'd return it to his son. Kofi reached out carefully, almost afraid to touch it. When his fingers closed around the watch, he closed his eyes. For a moment, he wasn't 32. He was 12 again. A boy who never got to say goodbye. Chairman Kang spoke quietly. He died protecting people he didn't know. He never asked for recognition. He simply did what was right. Another pause. You remind me of him. Kofi couldn't answer. Neither could I. If the story has touched your heart so far, take 1 second to like this video. Not for the algorithm. For the fathers who taught their children that character matters more than power. And if you're new here, subscribe to the AfroK Tales. Because we're almost at the ending, and I promise you, it's worth staying for. 3 hours later, rain had started. Light, cold. The kind that turned Seoul streets into mirrors. Our vehicle stopped 2 blocks from the freight terminal. Ryu's voice came through the radio. Positions. Team 1 ready. Team 2 ready. Chairman Kang answered. Execute. The explosion came first. Not large. Just enough. Across the harbor, the fake warehouse erupted with alarms. Floodlights switched on. Men shouted. Vehicles rushed toward the noise. Exactly as planned. Inside our terminal, half the guards left. Kofi looked at me. Now. We slipped through a maintenance entrance. Dark corridors. Shipping crates. Forklifts. Silence. Too much silence. Then, a voice. Weak. Kofi? He froze. Auntie. Another whisper. Here. We followed the sound. A steel door. Locked. Kofi forced it open with a crowbar. Inside, Amma sat tied to a chair. Bruised. Exhausted. Alive. Kofi. He rushed to her. I've got you. She touched his face. They said. You'd come. I promised. Then, the lights came on. Every light. The warehouse flooded with brightness. A slow clap echoed behind us. 1, 2, 3. We turned. An older man stepped forward. Silver hair. Perfect suit. Cold smile. Chairman Victor Asare. So, he said softly. The sun finally came. More than 20 armed men emerged from the shadows. Weapons raised. Surrounding us. I felt Kofi move slightly in front of me, shielding us. Even now, Victor smiled. Just like your father. He always stood in front of everyone else. And look where that got him. Kofi's voice remained steady. You murdered him. No, Victor corrected. I removed an inconvenience. My hands clenched. The room felt impossibly still. Victor continued. You know, I've waited 20 years to meet you. He reached into his jacket, pulled out my mother's journal. And thanks to your girlfriend's family, I finally have every witness. He smiled. I suppose I should thank Chairman Kang. Kofi took one slow step forward. You've already lost. Victor laughed. Have I? He looked around. You have no weapons. No army. No escape. What exactly have I lost? Kofi smiled. The calmest smile I'd ever seen. You assumed Chairman Kang would send me here alone. Victor frowned. What? The warehouse doors exploded inward. Armored vehicles crashed through the loading bay. Flash grenades erupted. Ryu's voice thundered through the chaos. Go! 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 Black-suited operators flooded the warehouse from every entrance. At the center, walking calmly through the smoke, Chairman Kang. His eyes never left Victor. Victor's smile disappeared. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Chairman Kang stopped 10 feet away. You made one mistake, he said quietly. You threatened my family. Victor laughed once. Family? You disowned your own daughter. Chairman Kang looked briefly toward me, then toward Kofi. His voice carried across the entire warehouse. I corrected that mistake. The room fell silent. Every guard, every soldier, every hostage, every criminal, listening. Chairman Kang looked directly at Kofi, then said the words neither of us expected. Come home. A pause. Son. I felt tears fill my eyes. Kofi stood completely still, unable to speak. 20 years of loss. Months of rejection. Every misunderstanding. Every sacrifice. Reduced to one word. Son. Behind Victor, one frightened gunman slowly raised his rifle. No one noticed, except Aunt Amma. Her eyes widened. Kofi! She screamed. There are two kinds of families. The ones you're born into, and the ones that choose you. Sometimes, the second kind saves your life. The rifle fired. The sound echoed through the warehouse before anyone could react. Everything slowed. The gunman wasn't aiming at Chairman Kang. He wasn't aiming at me. He was aiming at Kofi. Avoid it! I screamed. Too late. Kofi turned instinctively. The bullet struck his shoulder. The force spun him backward. He crashed into a stack of wooden crates. For one impossible second, the world stopped. Kofi! I ran toward him. Chairman Kang moved before anyone else. His expression transformed. Not into anger, into something far colder. The kind of calm that appears just before absolute violence. Take them. His voice was quiet. Ryu didn't hesitate. Kang's security surged forward. The warehouse erupted into controlled chaos. Gunfire, shouting, smoke. Orders barked across radios. Within seconds, Victor's men were overwhelmed. They had expected negotiation. They had found preparation. Victor Asare tried to run. Chairman Kang saw him. He walked, not rushed. Walked, every step measured. Every step inevitable. Victor reached a side exit. The door opened. 3 members of Ryu's team stood waiting. There was nowhere left to go. You built your empire on frightened children, Chairman Kang said. You murdered honest men. You thought time would erase what you did. Victor laughed despite the rifles pointed at him. You think killing me changes history? Chairman Kang looked at him steadily. No. It changes the future. He nodded once. Take him alive. Victor's smile vanished. Meanwhile, I dropped beside Kofi. Blood stained his shirt. Not much. Too much. His breathing was steady. The bullet had passed cleanly through the muscle. Painful. Not fatal. I pressed my scarf against the wound. Stay with me. He managed a weak smile. You always give orders. Even when you're crying. I am not crying. You are. I laughed despite myself. Then cried harder. Aunt Amma reached us. She cupped Kofi's face with trembling hands. I promised your father, she whispered, that I'd keep you alive. Kofi covered her hand with his. You did. The paramedics arrived minutes later. As they treated Kofi, police units surrounded the terminal. Not local officers. International investigators. The evidence inside my mother's journal, combined with the digital records recovered from Victor's servers, connected crimes across 4 countries. Human trafficking, money laundering, political corruption. For 20 years, people believed the Black Coast Syndicate couldn't be touched. That night, the arrests began. 3 months later, autumn arrived quietly in Seoul. The city looked different somehow. Or maybe, we did. Kofi had recovered completely. The scar on his shoulder remained. He joked that it gave him an excuse to lose arguments. It reminds me, he told me one evening, that surviving is a responsibility. Aunt Amma chose to stay in Korea for a while. She and Mr. Choi had developed an unexpected friendship. They argued constantly about tea. She insisted Ghanaian tea was better. He claimed Korean tea required more patience. Neither ever admitted defeat. Ryu remained exactly the same, except once. I caught him smiling, very slightly, when Kofi beat him at chess. He denied it happened. Everyone else remembered. And my father changed in ways no one expected. Not dramatically, quietly. The most meaningful changes usually are. He began leaving the office earlier. He visited my mother's memorial every Sunday. He reopened the medical foundation she'd started years ago in Ghana. This time, under 2 names, Chairwoman Hannah Kong and Kofi Mensah, Kofi's father, partners again, just as they should have been. One afternoon, my father invited Kofi to lunch. No security, no advisors, just the 2 of them. When they returned, neither said much, but something had changed. Later that evening, I asked Kofi what happened. He smiled. He apologized. For everything? No. He apologized only for the things that were actually his fault. I frowned. That's very specific. It is. What else? Kofi laughed softly. He asked if I'd help modernize the foundation's education programs. And I said yes. Life didn't become perfect. It became honest. There were difficult conversations. Long absences when business called. Moments when old habits returned. But now, no one hid behind silence. When something hurt, we spoke. When something mattered, we said it. Love stopped being something protected by distance. It became something strengthened by truth. 1 year later, spring returned. Cherry blossoms drifted across the courtyard of the Kang estate. The same estate where I'd once been told I was no longer welcome. Today, the gates stood open. Children ran across the lawn. Laughter echoed through the gardens. The Medical Foundation was celebrating the opening of a scholarship program connecting students from Ghana and South Korea. My mother's dream, Kofi's father's dream, finally completed. As the ceremony ended, my father walked onto the stage. He rarely spoke publicly. When he did, people listened. He looked over the crowd, then toward Kofi. There is something, he began. I should have said long ago. The audience became silent. I believed blood alone defined family. He shook his head slowly. I was wrong. He looked directly at Kofi. A man is not measured by where he comes from. He is measured by who he protects, what he sacrifices. And how he loves. A pause. When my daughter chose this man, I believed she was abandoning her future. A faint smile touched his face. In truth, she was leading me toward mine. He stepped away from the podium, walked across the stage, and embraced Kofi, not as a performance, not for the cameras, as a father embraces his son. The applause lasted almost a full minute. Later that evening, the guests had gone. The gardens were quiet. Kofi and I sat beneath the cherry blossoms, exactly the way we'd sat together the night we first admitted we loved each other. He reached into his pocket. "You know," he said, "I've been carrying this around for months. A small velvet box." I laughed. "I was wondering when you'd stop hiding it." He looked embarrassed. "You knew. I know you." He opened the box. A simple ring. Elegant. No unnecessary diamonds. No extravagance. Just beautiful craftsmanship. "I don't have a speech," he admitted. "I've learned those usually don't survive around you." I smiled through tears. "Good." He took my hand. "I just know that every version of my future I want has you in it. Will you marry me?" I looked at the man who had walked into my life carrying nothing but honesty. The man who had stood between bullets and strangers. The man who had forgiven when hatred would have been easier. The man my father once rejected, and now proudly called son. "Yes," I whispered. "Always yes." Behind us, my father stood quietly on the balcony, watching. Mr. Choi joined him. "They look happy. They earned it." Mr. Choi smiled. "You know, you could simply tell him you love him." Chairman Kang looked offended. "I already did." "No." Mr. Choi chuckled. "You called him son." Chairman Kang looked back toward the garden, toward Kofi, toward me, toward the family he'd nearly lost because of pride. A slow smile appeared, the kind that belonged to a man who had finally stopped carrying the weight of old mistakes. "Perhaps," he said softly, "I'll tell him tomorrow." Sometimes, the greatest inheritance a parent leaves behind isn't wealth, or power, or a famous name. It's the courage to become a better person before it's too late. And in the end, that was what my Korean Mafia father truly discovered. He thought love had taken his daughter away. Instead, love gave him a son, family, and the chance to honor a promise made 20 years earlier by two brave people who believed that protecting the innocent was worth any sacrifice. Some stories end with revenge. Ours ended with redemption. And somehow, that was always the stronger ending. The end. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the AfroK Tales, and leave a comment telling us, what was your favorite moment? The reconciliation between Kang Min-jae and Kofi, or the final proposal under the cherry blossoms? Until next time, thank you for being part of the AfroK Tales family.